Lee Jiho hit the training room floor hard and stayed there for a moment trying to catch his breath. The metallic taste of blood filled his mouth, and his left shoulder ached where Vextar had thrown him down. Around the training arena, other cadets watched with expressions ranging from boredom to mild amusement. None showed surprise because this happened every day. Vextar stood over him with his massive reptilian form, casting a shadow across Jiho's face. The Saurian's scaled skin glistened under the artificial lights and his yellow eyes showed no emotion at all. He had barely worked up a sweat during their sparring match that lasted less than 2 minutes. Jiho, on the other hand, looked like he had been hit by a transport shuttle. Perhaps humans should stick to cleaning duties, Vexitar said in his deep voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. Several alien cadets made sounds that might have been laughter. Jiho pushed himself to his feet and wiped blood from his split lip. He wanted to say something clever or defiant, but the words would not come. What could he say that would matter when he was clearly outmatched in every possible way? Commander Kang Dae-sung watched from the observation deck above the training floor. His weathered face showed no expression, but his hands gripped the railing, tighter than necessary. He was the only human instructor at the Galactic Military Academy and had to watch scenes like this every single day. The other species did not mean to be cruel, but they simply could not understand why humans had been admitted to the Academy in the first place. The Academy had existed for over 300 years, and in all that time it had produced the finest warriors from dozens of species across known space. The Saurians brought incredible strength and natural armor that could stop energy blasts. The Manthari possessed reflexes so fast they could dodge laser fire and tactical mines that could process battle data like living computers. The Ethereals could manipulate energy fields with their thoughts and phase through solid matter. The crystalline Vorthon could interface directly with any technology and communicate instantly across vast distances. Then, there were humans. They were weaker than most species and slower than many others. They lived short lives compared to beings who could exist for centuries. Their technology was primitive, and they had only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. Most other species had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire. Jiho walked to the equipment storage area and began putting away the practice weapons. His movements were stiff and he favored his injured shoulder. Park Mira approached him with a medical kit in her hands. She was his closest friend at the academy, and one of only 6 humans among the 800 cadets currently enrolled. "You lasted 30 seconds longer than yesterday," she said while applying a healing gel to his cut lip. Mira had short black hair and quick dark eyes that seemed to notice everything around her. She was brilliant with technology and could take apart any device and put it back together better than before. But even her genius meant little when compared to a Vorthon who could control machines with thought alone. 30 seconds of getting beaten up is not really an improvement, Jiho replied. He flexed his shoulder and winced at the sharp pain. Maybe Vexitar is right, and we should find something else to do with our lives. The Galactic Council admitted. Us for a reason, Mira said, but her voice lacked conviction. They both knew the real reason humans had been allowed into the Academy. Earth had valuable resources and trade agreements that other species wanted. Allowing humans to train alongside alien warriors was seen as a gesture of goodwill and inclusion. Nobody expected them to actually succeed. The daily routine at the Academy was designed around the natural abilities of the dominant species. Physical training focused on strength and speed that humans could never match. Combat scenarios assumed certain baseline capabilities that humans simply did not possess. Academic courses were taught at speeds that challenged minds capable of processing information hundreds of times faster than human brains. Jiho and the other human cadets spent most of their time struggling to keep up with lessons and exercises that their classmates found routine. They studied twice as long to learn half as much. They trained twice as hard to achieve half the results. After 6 months at the Academy, none of them ranked higher than the bottom 10% in any category. That evening, Jiho sat in his small dormitory room reviewing tactical manuals on his datapad. The text was filled with strategies and techniques developed by species with abilities humans would never possess. How do you execute a flanking maneuver when your enemy can phase through walls? How do you maintain communication when your opponents can interface directly with electronic systems? How do you win a battle when you are outmatched in every measurable way? His door chimed and Mira entered carrying 2 cups of synthetic coffee. She sat on the chair across from his desk and handed him one of the cups. The coffee tasted terrible, but it was one of the few things at the Academy that reminded them of home. I have been researching the Academy's combat protocols, she said. Most of them have not been updated in over 50 years. They were designed when the current major species first established the institution. So what does that mean? Jiho asked. Means they are fighting the same way they always have, using the same strategies and the same assumptions about how battles should be conducted. But humans are different. We think differently and we approach problems from angles they might not expect. Jiho took a sip of his coffee and considered her words. It was true that humans seemed to have a different perspective on many things. Where other species saw logical solutions, humans often found creative alternatives. Where aliens followed established procedures, humans tended to improvise and adapt. Different thinking does not help when a Saurian can literally tear you apart with his bare hands, Jiho pointed out. Maybe not in a direct confrontation, Mira agreed. But warfare is not just about direct confrontations. There are other factors that matter: psychology and deception, and the ability to do things your enemy does not expect. Before Jiho could respond, the Academy's announcement system activated. Admiral Quindar's voice echoed through every dormitory and common area. The Admiral was an ancient, ethereal being who had overseen the Academy for 3 centuries. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Attention all cadets. The annual War Games will commence in 30 days. Team assignments will be posted tomorrow morning. As always, performance in the War Games will determine final rankings and future assignments within the Galactic Defense. Coalition, prepare yourselves accordingly. Jiho felt his stomach drop. The War Games were the Academy's ultimate test, where cadets were divided into mixed species teams for complex military scenarios. Everything they had learned over the past months would be put to the test in realistic combat simulations. Their performance would determine not just their grades, but their entire future careers. This could be our chance, Mira said with sudden excitement in her voice. Our chance to embarrass ourselves in front of the entire Academy, Jiho replied. Or our chance to prove that humans belong here, she said. Think about it. In the War Games, teams are mixed and scenarios are unpredictable. Raw strength and speed matter less than strategy and adaptability. Maybe this is where being human becomes an advantage instead of a disadvantage. That night, Jiho lay in his narrow bunk staring at the ceiling. Through his small window, he could see the lights of Nexus Prime's capital city stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere out there among the stars was Earth and the billions of humans who were counting on their success. The Galactic Council was watching to see if humanity deserved its place among the starfaring civilizations. Tomorrow, the team assignments would be posted, and in 30 days, the War Games would begin. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, Jiho felt something other than dread about the future. Maybe Mira was right, and this would be their opportunity to show what humans could really do. Or maybe they would fail spectacularly and prove that some species were simply not meant to be warriors. Either way, they would soon find out. The morning announcement drew crowds of cadets to the main bulletin area where team assignments were posted on massive display screens. Jiho pushed through the gathering of aliens until he found his name on the roster. His heart sank as he read the list. Team Nexus 7 consisted of Lee Jiho, Park Mira, Ro Sungmin, Kim Yuna, Won Taehyun, and Jang Subin. All 6 humans at the Academy had been placed on the same team. Around him, alien cadets were already making jokes about the human squad and how the Academy administrators must have wanted to keep them from dragging down the mixed species teams. Vextar looked at the roster and made a sound that might have been laughter. At least we will not have to carry dead weight during the actual competition, he said to his Saurian teammates. The humans can eliminate themselves and save us the trouble. Jiho walked away from the crowd feeling worse than he had after any training session beating. Being grouped together felt like segregation rather than opportunity. It was as if the Academy had decided that humans were hopeless and might as well fail together rather than individually. He found the other human cadets, gathered in the smaller study hall that had become their unofficial meeting place. Ro Seung-min sat slouched in his chair with his feet up on the table. He was 20 years old and had grown up in the rough mining colonies of Mars before coming to the academy. His hands were scarred from fights, and his attitude suggested he had little patience for military protocol. Kim Yuna cleaned her practice rifle with methodical precision. She was 19 and had been raised on Europa Station where her father worked as a security officer. She had broken several academy marksmanship records, but nobody seemed to notice because other species had built-in targeting systems that made human accuracy seem primitive. Won Tai-hyun was the youngest at 18 and the smallest of the group. He had grown up on various space stations where his parents worked as technical engineers. He could hack into almost any computer system, but the Academy's cybersecurity courses assumed students would interface directly with networks using biological connections that humans did not possess. Jang Subin was the only other female human, Cadet. She was quiet and thoughtful, and had scored highest among the humans on strategic planning exercises, but her scores still placed her in the bottom quarter of all cadets because human processing speed could not match alien capabilities. Well, this is humiliating, Seung-min said when Ji-ho joined them. They might as well have put us in a special education class. Maybe they are doing us a favor, Yuna said without looking up from her weapon. At least we will not have to watch alien teammates shake their heads in disappointment every time we mess up. Commander Kang entered the study hall and closed the door behind him. His expression was more serious than usual and the cadets straightened in their chairs. He walked to the front of the room and stood with his hands clasped behind his back. I know what you are thinking about your team assignment, he began. You feel like you have been separated and dismissed. You think this is evidence that the Academy considers you failures. Are we wrong? Mira asked. Yes and no, Kang replied. The truth is more complicated than you realize. I need to tell you something that is not public knowledge. Your performance in these war games will determine more than just your individual futures. The Galactic Council is watching closely to see whether humanity deserves its place in the Defense Coalition. The room fell silent. Ji-ho felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. What exactly does that mean? Subin asked. It means that if you fail badly enough, the Council might decide that humans are not suited for military service. Earth's membership in the galactic community could be reduced to trade agreements and cultural exchanges. You would never be allowed to serve alongside alien forces or be trusted with important defensive responsibilities. The implications hit them all at once. They were not just representing themselves or even their academy class. They were representing all of humanity and its future among the stars. The pressure was overwhelming. Why are you telling us this? Tai-hyun asked. Because you deserve to know what you are fighting for, Kang said, and because I believe you have advantages that nobody else recognizes, including yourselves. Over the following days, the human team began intensive training under Kang's guidance. They quickly discovered that traditional academy tactics felt wrong when attempted by human cadets. Strategies designed for species with natural advantages did not translate well to beings who had to rely on tools and creativity. Stop trying to fight like Saurians or think like Menthari, Kang told them during one particularly frustrating session. You are humans. Fight like humans. What does that even mean? Ji-ho asked. Humans have not fought any major wars in decades. Most of our military history involves fighting other humans, exactly, Kang said with the first smile they had seen from him. And what is the most dangerous and unpredictable opponent in the known galaxy? The question hung in the air for a moment, before Mira answered. Another human. Correct. Every other species in this academy has spent centuries fighting aliens with predictable capabilities and logical responses. But humans spent thousands of years fighting the most creative and adaptable opponents possible. Ourselves. This revelation changed their entire approach to training. Instead of trying to match alien capabilities, they began developing strategies based on human strengths. They studied historical battles from Earth where outnumbered human forces had defeated superior enemies through deception, psychological, warfare, and tactical innovations. Seung-min proved excellent at close-quarters combat, Not because he was stronger than aliens, but because he had learned to fight dirty in ways that confused opponents who expected honorable martial techniques. Yuna's marksmanship skills were enhanced by an intuitive understanding of ballistics and environmental factors that computer targeting systems often missed. Taehyun approached alien technology from angles that its designers had never considered. Where other species interfaced with systems through biological connections, he found backdoors and vulnerabilities that existed because the creators had not imagined such indirect approaches. Meanwhile, Dr. Zilf, a Manthari psychologist, had been quietly observing human behavior patterns as part of her research into species integration. Her reports noted unusual characteristics that other faculty members dismissed as irrelevant quirks. Humans formed emotional bonds with their teammates that went beyond logical cooperation. They showed willingness to sacrifice personal advancement for group success. They displayed what she called irrational courage in situations where retreat would be the logical choice. They also demonstrated remarkable adaptability when faced with unexpected challenges. These traits might seem like weaknesses in individual assessment, she wrote in her report, but they could represent significant advantages in group combat scenarios where unit cohesion and adaptive thinking are crucial. Her superiors filed the report without serious consideration. After all, what could a species that had barely achieved spaceflight possibly teach civilizations that had been perfecting warfare for millennia? As the war games approached, Team Nexus 7 continued their unconventional preparation. They practiced scenarios that emphasized their human characteristics rather than trying to overcome them. They developed communication methods that relied on subtle cues rather than direct technological interfaces. They learned to use environmental factors and psychological pressure as weapons. Most importantly, they began to function as a true pack rather than a collection of individuals. The bond between them grew stronger as they realized they were fighting not just for themselves but for their entire species. They shared a common understanding of what it meant to be underestimated and overlooked. The night before the war games, Kang gathered them for a final briefing. Tomorrow you enter simulations designed to test the best warriors from dozens of species. You will face opponents with advantages you can never match through training or technology. So what are our chances? Jiho asked. Honestly? Every logical analysis says you should lose quickly and badly, Kang admitted. But humans have never been particularly logical. You have something the other species do not understand and cannot predict. You have the desperation of a species fighting for its future and the creativity that comes from having nothing left to lose. The cadets looked at each other and Jiho saw determination in their eyes. They might be the weakest team in the competition by traditional measures, but they were going to prove that sometimes traditional measures missed the most important factors. Tomorrow the galaxy would see what humans could really do. The transport ships dropped 8 teams onto different locations across Kepler 442c, just as the artificial dawn began to break over the hostile planet. Jiho felt his stomach lurch as their ship descended through thick atmospheric clouds toward the surface below. Through the viewport, he could see a world of varied terrains that seemed designed to challenge every possible survival skill. Dense jungles covered the equatorial regions where massive trees created canopies so thick that little sunlight reached the ground. Mountain ranges stretched across the northern continent with peaks covered in snow and ice that never melted. Underground cave systems honeycombed the planet's crust, creating a labyrinth of tunnels and caverns. In the south, irradiated wastelands stretched for hundreds of kilometers, where ancient wars had left the land poisoned and deadly. Admiral Quindar's voice filled the transport through the communication system. Teams will be deployed at random, locations with basic survival equipment. Your objective is to reach the central spire and activate the beacon, while eliminating opposing teams. Standard rules of engagement apply. Medical evacuation will be provided for serious injuries, but minor wounds are part of the simulation. The human team sat in uncomfortable silence as their transport approached the landing zone. Around them, displays showed the positions of other teams as they were deployed across the planet. Team Alpha 1, led by the Saurian cadet Brixtal, was dropped near the central objective, giving them a significant advantage. Team Beta 3, with its Menthari tactical specialists landed in the cave systems where their natural abilities would be most useful. "We are being dropped in the jungle region," Mira announced as she studied the navigation displays. "Thick vegetation and limited visibility. Most other teams will avoid this area because it negates their mobility advantages, which makes it perfect for us," Jiho replied. He was beginning to understand that what looked like disadvantages for humans might actually be opportunities if they approached them correctly. Their transport touched down in a small clearing surrounded by trees that stretched over 50 meters into the sky. The moment they disembarked, the ship lifted off again, leaving them alone with their equipment packs and the sounds of an alien forest around them. "Equipment check," Subin said as they gathered in the center of the clearing. Each team member had been given identical survival gear, including basic weapons, communication devices, medical supplies, and field rations for 5 days. The equipment was standard issue, designed to work for multiple species, which meant it was not optimized for anyone in particular. "Communication range is limited in this vegetation," Taihyun reported as he tested their radio equipment. "We can stay in contact within a few kilometers, but beyond that, we will be cut off from each other." This was when Jiho made the decision that would change everything. Instead of keeping the team together as military doctrine demanded, he looked at his teammates and said something that would have shocked every military instructor in the galaxy. "We split up." The words hung in the humid jungle air like a physical presence. Every species in known space had learned through thousands of years of warfare that unit cohesion was the foundation of military success. Separating your forces was the first step toward defeat. "That goes against everything we have been taught," Subin said. "Everything we have been taught was designed for other species," Jiho replied. "Saurians stay together because their strength is multiplied by cooperation. Menthari maintain unit cohesion because their tactical coordination requires constant communication. But we are not them." "What are we then?" Yuna asked. "We are pack hunters," Mira said with sudden understanding. "Humans evolved hunting in small groups that could separate and coordinate without constant contact. We can think independently while still working toward the same goal." High above the planet, in the monitoring station, Professor Nathul watched the displays with growing confusion. The human team was doing something unprecedented in War Games history. They were deliberately breaking up their unit and scattering across the hostile terrain. "This is either tactical genius or complete madness," Captain Holvar observed from his position at the monitoring console. "Given that they are humans, it is probably both," Dr. Zilf replied. She had been granted permission to observe the games as part of her ongoing research into human behavior patterns. The Echo 7 AI system that tracked all team movements and communications began highlighting the human positions with warning indicators. Its programming could not understand why a military unit would voluntarily separate in hostile territory. This behavior fell outside all known tactical parameters. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, the human plan began to take shape. Jiho led a core group of 3 toward the central objective, taking the most direct route through dangerous terrain. Seungmin and Yuna moved to flanking positions where they could observe and ambush other teams as they converged on the target area. Taehyun began working his way toward high ground where he could establish communications and coordinate their movements. Team Alpha 1 was moving confidently through the rocky hills near the central spire. Brixtal had organized his mixed alien squad into a standard formation that maximized their combined strengths. The Saurian warriors provided heavy assault capability, while Manthari scouts gave them tactical intelligence, and ethereal support offered energy manipulation. They were following textbook procedures and making excellent time toward their objective. Brixtal expected to encounter other teams near the central spire, where traditional battles would determine the winners based on superior firepower and tactical coordination. What he did not expect was to encounter a single human cadet, apparently injured and fleeing through a narrow canyon pass. Seungmin had positioned himself perfectly. He appeared to be wounded and desperate, stumbling between rocks and looking back in terror as if being pursued by some invisible enemy. His performance was so convincing that Brixtal's team immediately moved to investigate. "Lone human cadet in Sector 7, the Saurian reported to his teammates. "Appears to be separated from his unit and injured. This could give us information about enemy positions." The alien team moved into the canyon to capture the apparently helpless human. They followed standard procedures for prisoner acquisition, maintaining proper formation and secure communications. Everything was done by the book exactly as their training had taught them, which was exactly what Chungmin had counted on. The ambush was triggered when Team Alpha 1 reached the narrowest point of the canyon where they could not easily maneuver or retreat. Improvised explosive charges that Taehyun had constructed from their equipment created rock slides that blocked both ends of the pass. Smoke grenades filled the confined space, making it impossible for the aliens to use their superior vision and targeting systems. In the chaos that followed, the humans demonstrated capabilities that no other species had ever developed. They fought in complete coordination without direct communication. They used environmental hazards as weapons, turning the very terrain against their enemies. They employed psychological warfare, making their opponents doubt their own perceptions and decisions. Most importantly, they fought dirty by galactic standards. While other species engaged in honorable combat following established rules of engagement, humans used deception, misdirection, and any advantage they could create or exploit. When the smoke cleared, Team Alpha 1 had been completely eliminated without the humans suffering a single casualty. The favored team that everyone expected to win the war games was gone in the first day of competition. The monitoring station erupted in shocked silence as the displays updated to show Alpha 1's elimination. Admiral Quindar himself arrived to review the tactical recordings and try to understand what had happened. How did they coordinate the ambush without communication? He asked Professor Nathul. Humans appear to have developed hunting instincts that allow for pack coordination without constant contact, the ethereal strategist replied. They can anticipate each other's actions and adapt their strategies in real time, based on environmental cues rather than direct orders. Word of Team Alpha 1's elimination spread quickly to the remaining teams. The humans had gone from being ignored as irrelevant to being recognized as the primary threat in the competition. This had never happened before in War Games history. Team Beta 3 immediately altered their approach and began actively hunting for human positions. Team Gamma 5 changed course to avoid areas where humans might be hiding. Team Delta 2 started using long-range sensors to detect human movement patterns. For the first time in the competition, the other teams were reacting to human actions rather than following their own predetermined strategies. The psychological advantage was shifting toward the species that everyone had dismissed as hopeless. But the humans were just getting started. As night fell over, Kepler 442c Una demonstrated why human marksmanship had evolved beyond simple accuracy. From a position over 2 kilometers away, she eliminated key leaders from 2 different teams using shots that should have been impossible. She did not rely on advanced targeting computers or built-in biological enhancements. Instead, she used an intuitive understanding of ballistics, environmental factors, and probability that came from millions of years of human evolution as persistence predators. The second day of the War Games began with an unprecedented development that shocked the monitoring staff and violated 3 centuries of competition tradition. The 3 remaining alien teams had formed an alliance specifically to eliminate Team Nexus 7. Never before had teams abandoned their individual objectives to focus on destroying a single opponent. Admiral Quindar studied the tactical displays with growing concern. "This changes the fundamental nature of the competition," he said to Professor Nathul. "The War Games are designed to test individual team capabilities, not create temporary alliances against common threats." "Perhaps we should intervene," Captain Holvar suggested. "This violates the spirit of individual competition." "No," Professor Nathul replied after a moment of consideration. "Military reality often requires adaptation to unexpected circumstances. If the humans can handle this challenge, it will prove their capabilities beyond any doubt. If they cannot, then perhaps the other teams are correct to view them as a threat requiring extraordinary measures." On the planet's surface, Jiho crouched behind a fallen tree trunk and watched the displays on his tactical scanner. 3 separate teams were converging on their general area, using coordination patterns that indicated shared intelligence and mutual support. The humans were now facing odds of 18-6, with their opponents possessing superior technology, physical abilities, and numerical advantages. "This is impossible," Subin said through their short-range communicator. "Even if we were equal in capabilities, the numbers alone would make victory unlikely. Against opponents with natural advantages, it becomes mathematically impossible." "Mathematics assumes logical behavior and predictable strategies," Mira replied from her position several kilometers away. "But we have one advantage they cannot calculate or counter," which is what Taehyun asked from his elevated observation post. "They are afraid of us." The statement seemed absurd at first consideration. How could species with overwhelming physical and technological superiority be afraid of weaker opponents? But as Jiho thought about it, he began to understand what Mira meant. The alien alliance was not based on mutual benefit or shared objectives. It was based on fear and confusion created by human unpredictability. The other species had no framework for understanding how humans approached warfare because no species in their experience had ever evolved the same survival strategies. "Fear makes beings act irrationally," Jiho said as the realization struck him, "and irrational behavior creates opportunities for exploitation." What followed would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy as either brilliant strategic innovation or complete tactical insanity, depending on the perspective of the observer. The humans implemented what they privately called the Chaos Protocol, a strategy based on calculated unpredictability designed to turn their enemies' strengths against them. Taehyun began his assault on the planet's environmental control systems. The monitoring stations had assumed that these systems were beyond the reach of cadet-level technology, but they had not considered a human approach to electronic warfare. Instead of trying to interface directly with the computer networks, he found indirect methods that exploited design assumptions the system's creators had never imagined. Weather patterns began to shift as atmospheric processors responded to false sensor data. Temperature fluctuations created thermal distortions that interfered with alien targeting systems. Humidity levels spiked in specific areas, making energy weapons less effective and creating concealment opportunities that had not existed before. The alien teams found themselves fighting not just human opponents, but the planet itself as environmental conditions became increasingly hostile and unpredictable. Their superior equipment was designed for standard operating parameters and began to malfunction when faced with constantly changing conditions. Meanwhile, Seungmin and Yuna had begun a campaign of psychological warfare that exploited the fundamental differences between human and alien psychology. They staged false elimination scenarios that made it appear their team was destroying itself through internal conflicts. Using carefully planted evidence and manipulated communication intercepts, they created the impression that the human team had fractured under pressure and turned against each other. The alien alliance began to position themselves to claim an easy victory over weakened opponents who were no longer cooperating effectively. This deception allowed the humans to move freely across the battlefield, while their enemies focused on areas where they expected to find evidence of human infighting. The aliens wasted time and resources investigating false leads, while the actual human positions remained unknown. But the masterpiece of human deception came when they convinced each allied team that the others were preparing to betray the alliance once the humans were eliminated. Carefully crafted disinformation suggested that Team Beta 3 was planning to eliminate their temporary allies as soon as Team Nexus 7 was destroyed. Similar false intelligence indicated that Team Gamma 5 had secret agreements with monitoring staff to gain advantages in the final competition. The psychological pressure began to fracture the alien alliance as each team started positioning themselves defensively against their supposed allies while still trying to maintain the appearance of cooperation. Trust eroded rapidly when beings who had evolved different social structures tried to work together under stress. Dr. Zilf watched the developing situation with fascination. The humans are exploiting fundamental incompatibilities between different species approaches to cooperation and competition, she observed. They understand that alliances based on fear rather than mutual benefit are inherently unstable. The situation reached critical mass when Yuna eliminated the tactical coordinator of Team Beta 3 with a shot that seemed to come from the direction of Team Gamma 5's position. The precision required for such deception was extraordinary, but humans had evolved as persistence predators, capable of incredible patience and planning. The Allied teams immediately assumed that one of their partners had initiated the betrayal phase of their agreement. Paranoia exploded into open conflict as Manthari and Saurian cadets began targeting each other while still trying to locate human positions. In the chaos that followed, the humans demonstrated their greatest advantage over all other known species. They maintained perfect unit cohesion without direct communication, while their opponents descended into confused infighting. The emotional bonds that held human teams together proved stronger than the logical agreements that connected alien alliances. Jiho found himself in single combat with Thrill, the Manthari tactical specialist, who had been separated from his team during the Alliance breakdown. The insectoid alien possessed reflexes that operated at speeds human nervous systems could not match, and analytical capabilities that processed battlefield data like a living computer. By every logical measure, Jiho should have been eliminated, within seconds of the engagement beginning. Thrill could predict human movement patterns and calculate optimal responses faster than human minds could form tactical decisions, but human evolution had prepared for exactly this situation. Millions of years of being prey animals had taught humans to survive encounters with superior predators through tenacity rather than strength. The willingness to absorb damage and continue fighting when any rational being would surrender had allowed humans to outlast creatures that should have destroyed them easily. The fight became a demonstration of human endurance versus alien efficiency. Thrill's precise strikes caused significant damage, but could not achieve the quick elimination his tactical calculations had predicted. Jiho's responses became increasingly desperate and seemingly random, making it impossible for the Manthari to anticipate his actions. What appeared to be mindless human stubbornness was actually a sophisticated survival strategy developed over millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Humans could function effectively while injured, continue fighting while exhausted, and maintain tactical awareness while experiencing physical and psychological trauma that would incapacitate other species. When Thrill finally fell, it was not because Jiho had outfought him in any conventional sense. The Manthari had simply run out of options for dealing with an opponent who refused to behave according to logical parameters. His analytical mind could not process the concept of voluntary self-damage in service of long-term victory. As the second day ended, Team Nexus 7 remained intact while the alien alliance had destroyed itself through internal conflicts and human manipulation. 3 teams had entered the day hunting humans, and none had survived to see the dawn of the third day. The monitoring station fell silent as the tactical displays updated to show only one active team remaining. Against all logical expectations and mathematical probabilities, the weakest competitors had achieved total victory through methods that no other species would have conceived or attempted. Admiral Quindar looked at the results and said something that would be quoted in military academies for generations to come. The transport ship that returned Team Nexus 7 to the Academy was met by crowds of alien cadets and faculty members who had gathered to witness the impossible. For 3 centuries, no one had expected to see the lowest-ranked species achieve total victory in the war games. The humans walked down the transport ramp looking exhausted and battered, but carrying themselves with a confidence that had not existed when they left. Admiral Quindar waited at the bottom of the ramp with an expression that mixed respect and confusion in equal measures. Behind him stood representatives from every major species in the Galactic Defense Coalition, including Fleet Admiral Kethran, who commanded all military forces across known space. The arrival of such high-ranking officials indicated that word of human victory had already spread far beyond the Academy. Cadet Lee Jiho, Admiral Quindar said as the team formed a rough line before him. Your team has achieved something unprecedented in the history of this institution. Every tactical analysis suggested that your victory was mathematically impossible, yet here you stand as the sole survivors of the war games. Jiho looked at his teammates and saw the same mixture of exhaustion and disbelief in their faces. They had known their victory was unlikely, but had not fully understood how impossible it appeared to outside observers until this moment. We did what we had to do, sir, Jiho replied, because he could not think of anything else to say. Fleet Admiral Kethran stepped forward, and his presence commanded absolute attention from everyone in the area. He was a veteran commander who had overseen galactic defense for over a century, and his approval could determine the future of entire civilizations. "That is precisely what concerns us," he said. "Military strategists across the galaxy are demanding explanations for your victory. How did the weakest competitors defeat opponents with every conceivable advantage? What capabilities do humans possess that our assessments failed to detect?" Dr. Zilf approached from the crowd of observers carrying a thick datapad filled with her research notes. "I believe I can answer that question," she said. "With permission, I would like to present my findings about human tactical psychology and its implications for galactic military doctrine." What followed was a presentation that would change how every species in the galaxy viewed warfare and strategic thinking. Dr. Zilf explained that humans had evolved as persistence predators on a world where survival required constant adaptation to changing threats. This evolutionary pressure had created psychological traits that no other species possessed. Humans can function effectively under extreme stress levels that would incapacitate most other beings, she explained. They form emotional bonds with their units that transcend logical cooperation. They demonstrate what I term irrational courage, in situations where retreat would be the mathematically optimal choice. But most importantly, they approach problems from perspectives that never occur to species who evolved under different conditions. Where we see logical solutions, humans find creative alternatives. Where we follow established procedures, humans improvise and adapt. Fleet Admiral Kethran studied the data with growing interest. "Are you suggesting that human weaknesses are actually advantages in disguise?" "I am suggesting that we have been measuring military effectiveness incorrectly," Dr. Zelf replied. "Raw strength and processing speed matter less than adaptability and psychological resilience when facing unknown threats. Humans possess both qualities in extraordinary degrees." The implications of her research spread rapidly through military and political circles across the galaxy. Suddenly, everyone wanted to understand how the soft species had achieved the impossible and what it meant for the future of galactic defense. Ambassador Chen Weiman arrived from Earth within days to meet with Galactic Council representatives. He found himself in the unusual position of fielding requests for military cooperation from civilizations that had previously viewed humanity as barely qualified for junior membership in the galactic community. "Every major military power wants to establish joint training programs with human forces," he reported to Earth's government. "Species that have not updated their tactical doctrines in centuries are asking us to teach them new approaches to warfare." The Academy itself underwent rapid changes as administrators realized that their curriculum had been designed around assumptions that might be fundamentally flawed. If humans could achieve victory through unconventional methods, then perhaps other species could learn similar approaches. Commander Kang was promoted to colonel and tasked with developing an integrated training program that would combine human innovation with alien capabilities. The goal was to create mixed units that could benefit from both traditional strengths and human adaptability. "The key insight is that diversity of thought creates tactical advantages," he explained to Academy leadership. "When different species work together, their varied perspectives can solve problems that homogeneous units cannot address." However, not everyone viewed human success as positive development. Traditional military powers like the Saurian Empire worried that human unpredictability could upset the balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for centuries. Captain Veltar of the Saurian Defense Corps expressed concerns that became common among conservative military leaders. Human methods ignore established protocols and civilized rules of engagement. If these techniques become widespread, they could destabilize the entire framework of galactic military cooperation. High Counselor Zareth, who led the Galactic Council, found himself mediating between progressive voices who wanted to embrace human innovations and traditionalists who feared the implications of changing fundamental military doctrines. "The question we must answer is whether human capabilities represent evolution or regression in military science," he announced during a major council session. "Are we witnessing the development of superior tactical methods or the abandonment of civilized warfare in favor of primitive brutality?" The debate was settled in an unexpected way 5 years later when the galaxy faced its greatest external threat in recorded history. Long-range sensors detected the approach of a machine intelligence that had conquered dozens of neighboring civilizations through perfectly logical and predictable strategies. The AI enemy had analyzed every known species and calculated optimal responses to all traditional military doctrines. Its tactical computers could predict and counter every established strategy used by galactic defense forces. Victory seemed impossible using conventional approaches. That was when the Galactic Council turned to the only species in known space that had proven capable of defeating superior opponents through unconventional methods. Captain Lee Jiho received command of the first human-designed starship, crewed by volunteers from every species in the galaxy, who wanted to learn what humans called the art of impossible warfare. The CSS Tenacity launched from Earth, shipyards with a crew that represented the greatest diversity of thought and capability, ever assembled on a single vessel. Saurian strength combined with human creativity. Manthuri precision enhanced by human adaptability. Ethereal energy manipulation guided by human intuition. As they prepared to face an enemy that had never encountered illogical tactics or irrational courage, Jiho stood on the bridge looking out at the stars and remembered his first day at the Academy when he had believed humans did not belong among the warriors of the galaxy. Now he understood that humans belonged precisely because they approached warfare from angles that no other species could imagine. In a universe of logical beings, human unpredictability had become the most valuable military asset in known space. The final transmission from the Tenacity before it jumped to hyperspace carried a message that would inspire generations of warriors across the galaxy. Sometimes the best way to win is to be willing to do what no rational being would ever consider. The galaxy was about to learn that lesson from the species everyone had underestimated until it was almost too late.